Hey guys, welcome to episode 62 of the 1023 Soul Shop Talk podcast. You know the drill. We do this every time. We say it like that every time. It feels weird. Maybe we should change it. I don't know. Yesterday was day one. Yesterday was day one of releasing build calls. And today is going to be day two. And we're going to follow this through for at least 5 days this week leading up to Black Friday in hopes that you guys can get some good relevant information before you spend a bunch of money on parts that aren't going to be a good fit or potentially will land you with more issues than you were counting on. This episode is it's a little bit shorter, and I think it's right around like 16 to 18 minutes. And so I'm going to start this off with a little bit longer intro, and I'm going to answer one of the questions that was asked from today's episode. It was an email that came in, and I think it actually addresses some really good points that I think are important, especially if you're getting started with the 7.3 build. This is really good information to begin with. This was an email from Michael, came in today related to yesterday's episode 61. It says, I've been watching your videos lately, trying to get good information about the 7.3 aftermarket. I have an old, tired, high mileage truck. I'm purchasing parts and mods that will help focus on reliability with a slight increase to performance. I believe I'm looking for a high pressure oil pump. Question is differences between CNC fab and diesel site. I've been looking at the Melling low pressure oil pump as well, and I have a question about all these crossover lines, 4-line feed kits, turbos, etc. I've listened to your recent episode 61 on YouTube, and I've heard at some point that there were fairly good performance gains just from the PHP Hydra. Do I focus on just refreshing the truck to OEM Plus and then add a Hydra? What would you recommend parts-wise going that route? The truck is my daily driver during the summer and is parked for 4 months out of the year. So, one, you didn't mention what kind of truck you have, Michael. I assume you're going to listen to today's. I hope you do. But I think this is going to be of benefit to anyone that's in a similar position to you, just new to 7.3s and looking to revive them because they all have pretty high mileage at this point. At least most of them do. So I'm going to kind of go point by point here, answer some of like the fundamental questions of beginning a build on these trucks, and then we'll get into the episode where we have a conversation about an OBS build. So your first question here was on differences between high pressure oil pumps. You know, we've talked a lot about when should you replace them and what should you look for to know if your high pressure oil pump keeps up. In this case, the question is the difference between CNC fab and diesel site. And I'm going to tell you our advice. Keep this in mind. I'm telling you advice as of right now. And this has been the case for a little while. But right now, what do we believe? You know, if you're listening to this 4 years down the road, it may have changed. But right now, we almost always recommend CNC Fabrication's high-pressure oil pumps. And that's not because diesel sites are bad pumps. They are fantastic. Diesel sites been building high-pressure oil pumps for a very long time. They do a fantastic job. What it comes down to is that specifically CNC Fabrication Stage 2 pump, their 20-degree pump, and diesel sites adrenaline pump are very similar. For like what you're getting for your money is very similar. They're both going to flow about the same amount of oil. They'll support around the same size of injectors. They both have similar features like stainless inserts for your high pressure oil lines. And the only real benefit that you're getting from diesel sites for the added cost, and they're quite a bit more expensive right now, is that the diesel site pump has about a 2-year longer warranty. And I'm not discounting that. There is times, and there are people who prefer a longer warranty. That's fine. But for us, what matters more than a warranty is what is the reliability of the part? Like, what is its likelihood of failing? And what we've seen, and we've used hundreds and hundreds of both of those pumps, and they're both very reliable pumps. They have an extremely low failure rate. And not even just a low failure rate. They have an extremely low chance of having just like low performance issues. And so because that's all we see as a benefit from them, they both come from fantastic companies. We prefer to go with CNC Fabs. If price was equalized, then that would change. But right now they're both fantastic pumps, and the CNCs are a little bit cheaper. But you also don't always need a 20-degree high-pressure oil pump. Is it ever going to hurt you to have one? No, not really. I mean, the truck you could drop a 20-degree pump in pretty much any truck and it will work fine. But it's also going to cost more. So, if you're looking at a like stage 1 injector, an AC code injector build on any one of these trucks, or even if you go like slightly bigger and move to a hybrid, like a 205/30, then like a 15-degree, or stock injectors, I should say, then a 17-degree like CNC stage 1 pump will be great. And I would recommend it even over like a Bosch replacement. One, because they're harder to find. Two, because they're by a big company that's difficult to deal with. Might be harder to get a warranty if there is a problem. And they're usually a little bit cheaper to go CNC's route. Plus, you get stainless inserts, so you don't have to worry about stripping the pump housing out, which is a really big nightmare if you have to deal with it. So that's kind of my point on HPOPs. You also asked about the Melling low-pressure oil pump. Melling's great. It'll work fine. They're cheap, easy to find. Highly recommended. If you need to replace your low-pressure oil pump, Melling is the way to go. There's basically never within a reasonable build anytime you need to deviate from like stock or a Melling low-pressure oil pump. You don't need a diesel side high flow pump or anything like that. If you have Michael, if you have questions about 4-line feed kits, turbos, etc., stuff like that, man, listen to this show. Listen to especially the next week, because we're going to cover a lot of those conversations right now. We've also covered a lot in the past episodes. You also asked, when it comes to making a little bit more power when you still want reliability, is the Hydra going to do that? And the thing to take away from this is, anytime you're looking to build a truck, if you just bought one or you're just getting into this, the first thing to do before ever trying to make more power in any way is check the health of the truck. Like, where does the truck sit right now? Do you need brakes, or check your diff fluid, check your transmission fluid, or change your transmission fluid, change your engine oil, and start by just looking for material. Is there material that shouldn't be there? Is there metal flakes in it? Is there anything that doesn't look like it shouldn't be there? And if you don't know, take it to a shop. I highly recommend taking it to a shop that you would trust to do the work. Probably more a diesel repair shop or a fleet shop is going to be a better choice if you're going that route. They're probably going to be a little more on the honest to the keeping the truck running side than a lot of performance shops. And I don't want to get too much into that, but that's probably where I would start. And then if the truck seems fairly healthy and you've done at least the basics of what is the health of the truck right now, the first thing to gaining power, always the first thing to gaining power, is going to be with tuning, especially when it comes to diesels. There's tons of other upgrades. There's air intakes and exhaust systems and Y pipes and intercoolers and spiders and intercooler piping and cooling solutions. There's lots you can do to these things. But the base of adding any sort of power is always going to be around tuning. And that will be the first step. And there might be a lot that comes right along behind it, like those air intakes and stuff like that. But the first step is with tuning. So yes, I mean, the first benefit you would get to adding power is going to be with tuning. And the PHP Hydra is the most versatile and well-supported device to do that. So I would highly recommend it after the reliability stuff is out of the way. Listen, if you guys like this, please send us an email. I would love it. We had pretty good downloads, pretty good listens, less on YouTube, but, many hundreds on the podcast, just the audio form. And I would love your feedback. Do you like this? Don't like it? What could we change to do better? If this is the kind of format we want to move this direction, then we'll do a lot of it. I would love to do it. I'd love to have conversations. It's usually ill-advised as a business to do what we're doing, but I do think that's the most beneficial for you guys. If we can answer your questions the way you're asking them, I don't see how we could do better than that to support you. So I would love your feedback. Keep signing up for build calls. We've done literally thousands of them over the years, and we'll continue doing it. That said, thanks for listening. Here's the conversation about an OBS build with a new engine, what you do with the truck. So you've got a new engine going into it. What does that engine build look like?
So it's a factory rebuild. I ended up losing a push rod on cylinder 8, smacked a valve against the piston, and then literally just catastrophic. Just, you couldn't even sit in the truck. It was rocking so bad. And so I thought maybe that dual mass flywheel had finally come apart because it was the original clutch in it. And I'm not a fan of the dual mass flywheel anyways. And so bought a clutch, put it in, and it got substantially better, but it didn't fix it. So then I decided, well, I'll pull my injectors, get them tested. Maybe I've got an injector that actually just finally died. Tested them. None of them tested great, but none of them tested bad either. And so rebuilt them myself, put them back in. Still, I mean, it was like I didn't change anything. I had another 7.3 engine. I decided, well, I'll tear that apart, rebuild it, and then I'll just swap it in the truck. I tore it apart, and it had terrible scarring on 4 of the 8 cylinders. Pulled the one out of my truck, pulled the head off of the passenger side, and was super happy because it looked beautiful. And then I pulled the head off the driver's side, and it looked a whole lot less beautiful. And so I had it bored out and sleeved rather than boring the whole engine. So went back together with it, put Smith Brother push rods, had the heads all redone. I didn't go with any Comp 910s or anything like that.
Just stock springs.
Yeah, just new stock springs. And then I did bellowed up pipes, did pedestal and adapter. I did the iRate competition fuel system with the regulated return. It's a 94 truck, and so I upgraded everything to the Power Stroke cooling system instead of sticking with the IDI cooling system. And then I put intercooler off of a 99 on it. And now I'm just kind of at a standstill waiting on what I should do.
Okay. And what specifically can I help you with then?
My question is so I've been looking at a KC turbo because I'd like to stay drop in just for the simple fact of where I had already bought all the up pipes and everything like that.
Sure.
And so I was looking at their stage 1, but I didn't know what injectors would be best to pair with that, if I should go with a 160 or if I should jump it up to a 180/30. And I don't know as much about tuning as like you guys do.
Sure. Well, basically, the way the truck is going to drive, like where it makes power and how it makes power, is not going to be noticeably different between a stock and 30% nozzle. In other words, it's not a concern. And what matters more is that you're able to you have an injector size that is capable of reaching the power you want to make, or drives the way you intend it to. But I will say this: between let's say a stock and a 30% nozzle, the only time there's a noticeable difference in power between those two is like the biggest difference is when you're wide open throttle in a race tune, and you're high pulse width, high injection pressure, high RPM. That's the biggest difference. And then the further you get away from that exact scenario, the less difference there is, to the point where if you're like, under 80% pedal in any tune that's not a race tune, they're both going to perform nearly identically. Like you would never notice the difference. And so the other question I think you had was like a 180cc injector versus a 160. It doesn't really matter. If you're going to use an AC code injector, like you're going to use a stock nozzle, I should say. If you're going to use a stock nozzle, then I would say the best choice is usually to use an AC code injector, just simply because it will do everything exactly like stock if you needed to, whether it's for diagnostics, whether it's for finding a replacement injector, 5 years down the road and 2,000 miles away from home, whatever your reason is. It's an OEM size, just not for these trucks. And so there's no benefit to more capacity with a stock nozzle. You can't use even 160 cc's out of a stock nozzle. in any reasonable time window. And so the short answer is, if you never intend to, or like you're not using the truck, you don't plan on using it wide open throttle and race tune, like if that's not the way you're going to drive it, then there's no benefit to a 160 or a 180/30 over just like a 160/0. They aren't going to do anything like better for you.
Because I looked at your build on your website, your power package, I guess is what you'd call it, and I noticed that it had the 160/0s was the option, and that's more of what I'm after. And I probably wouldn't change the turbo necessarily, but I would like a little bit faster of a spool up than that. Because that 1.10 AR housing is a little bit of a slow build up on boost when you're with a standard and you got a horse trailer on or something like that climbing a hill. You go to drop shift and now you've got to try to gather all your boost back up, where if I go with the 0.84 housing, it's going to spool faster than.
Yeah, if you just change the housing size and nothing else, then it would spool faster. In this case, like with the KC Stage 1, we are talking about a larger compressor and a larger turbine, and they are, because they're larger and heavier, going to be slightly slower. Now, they are slightly more efficient, and they are a better design than the factory one was. So typically what we hear people say their experience is and I would agree with it, is that going from a actual stock OBS turbo with the larger turbine housing to a like KC Stage 1 with a 0.84 housing, it's going to like spool up around the same spot. Like it'll be about as responsive at lower RPMs as the stock turbo. But when you are on top of it, which is a little bit easier to get on top of it, even at those lower RPMs, it actually does something. Like it moves a lot more air at like a lower shaft speed.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm after. And if I had it automatic, I probably wouldn't think about it as much. Trying to decide, because I don't want to go, a super monstrous build. I want, something that I can drive down the road. And if I want to get on it and, screw around, stuff like that, I can, and it'll have some power. But I also want it to be able to pull a trailer, and I'm not going to have to babysit EGTs or anything like that.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, every build is going to be different. Every truck will be different. Different altitudes matter. What kind of fuel you have matters. Everything is going to affect your EGTs. But if you've got the truck intercooled, you've got good fuel pressure, you will probably run into issues with the high pressure oil pump keeping up, but can kind of worry about that later. With a 160/0, you will be able to saturate that truck's ability to stay cool. And what I mean is any injector that's larger than that isn't going to be of any benefit when you're working the truck, because you can't use the full 160 cc's when you're pulling a grade with a horse trailer. It's not going to work. It's going to get too hot.
Okay. Yeah, and I plan on doing a high pressure oil pump. I just haven't fully decided if I would like to do the CNC fab or if I want to do the adrenaline. So that's where I'm leading into with once I get everything bought and everything, because I've had the truck down. I'm a full-time heavy equipment mechanic. I never really have got into the performance side. Like I can do, anything with an engine, but the tuning and stuff like that, that's not anything that I've really ever got into. And so that's why when I was like, well, these guys, and they know 7.3s, this is something that I can ask questions and get more of a mindset of how to put the parts that I'm wanting to put versus the parts that'll actually benefit me in everyday atmosphere. It's a standard. I'm not going to go out and win any drag races with it by any means.
Yeah. Well, and that's obviously, that doesn't sound like that's the goal of it. What I can do is I can send you over a list of like everything that we would recommend doing. Kind of like just a checklist of everything we'd recommend doing to like make the most optimized build based around like an AC code injector. Some of it like if the truck's already intercooled, like we're going to list out a couple options for intercoolers on there. The point is it needs to be intercooled. It doesn't really matter which option you go with, so you don't need to change it. But it is a complete list of like, if you're starting from scratch, this is the base of what we would do. I mean, we've done this thousands of times, so we've got a pretty good idea of what works, what doesn't, what's a waste of time to worry about, and what stuff really gets ignored and should be worried about. But I mean, you've got a lot of the basics out of the way. Having the biggest problem that we see with trucks like this is just old engines. It's major mechanical problems that get ignored in pursuit of trying to make more power. And having a fresh engine is a great start.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I was not about to forego, is halfway build my engine before I put it back in my truck. If I'm gonna build it, I'm gonna go through every nook and cranny and make sure that it's 100%.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I did is, I had my crank spun and checked for balance. I had my cam completely gone through everything to make sure that there's not something that I can't see that's going to be an issue once I do put it back in the truck.
Mm-hmm.
And out here in Utah, there's not a lot of, I guess you would say 7.3 knowledge in the aftermarket standpoint of, getting a little bit more boost out of your truck than, what it come with in 1994.
Right.
And so that's why I've been searching, and when I found you guys, it was like a godsend.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send this list over to you. I'll email it over when we're done. Did you have any specific questions about the injector sizing, why you would choose them, turbo sizing, clutches, or anything else to do with this that you're not totally sure of?
Well, and that was another question, is if I did decide to go with a bigger injector with like a 180/30 and the stage 1 KC turbo and a new high pressure oil pump on the clutch, would I be pushing the limits of just a factory replacement clutch with a solid flywheel?
Yeah, you will not be able to use a stock clutch and have it be like trustworthy, let's say.
Okay, because I don't know what kind of power it's going to make with that kind of setup.
I guess probably the best way I could say to look at it is you work with equipment, so I'm sure you have the same thoughts, but it's not really a matter of whether it's a 180/30 or a 160/0 and whether that would be the reason that your clutch doesn't hold up. It's a matter of if you're actually going to use the truck in the gap between a 160/0 and a 180/30, it's near its full amount of fuel that's available, so around 400 horsepower or not. But either one of them, either one of those injectors, anywhere near their full capacity, especially in a higher gear, is going to slip that clutch. It's not going to last. Now, the benefit is with either one of them, really, you can run anything from basically exactly like stock power all the way up to their full capacity. So if you don't want to worry about the clutch, you can just put it in a very mild tune and run it like that. But you also don't really want to do a build like this and not be able to use it. So
yeah, and I don't plan on a whole lot of heavy towing. My heavy towing, I might be 9,000-10,000 pounds, and so I guess one of my only questions would be, in a true using the truck atmosphere, what you are saying is that a 160/0 is going to be more than ample of an injector to do anything that I would need or want out of the truck, basically.
Yeah, well, ignoring nozzle size for a minute, you're not even going to be able to you cannot use, even on a great setup, if you have everything worked out the way you're saying, like I said, with the fuel system and HPOP and a great turbo and intercooled, even with a great setup like that still maintains good drivability and is responsive, you will not be able to use 160 cc's worth of fuel and keep the truck cool. So any more than that, for any more capacity, it doesn't do any good for you in a working scenario. It will make more power when you're not working the truck, but that's up to you if you just want more power, but it's not when it comes to actually working the truck, anything larger than a 160 will not gain you anything. And you start to have some, the larger you go, especially, there starts to be quite a few reasons why you wouldn't want to deal with the problems that come with a larger injector too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I've never really been in the performance game. I had a 97 7.3. Another guy in town was like, "Oh, I got this cool set of injectors. Let's put them in your truck." Mm-hmm. And so we went over to the shop that weekend, put them in, no tuner, no nothing. And then he found some super chip and put it on my truck, and I made a lot of smoke. I didn't make any more power, but man, I made a lot of smoke. I had them in for about 2 weeks and went back down to the shop, found my old injector sitting in a box, and cleaned them up and put my old ones back in because that was enough of that. My fuel mileage was terrible. My pulling I had no power because all it was doing was just flooding with fuel. And that's the last thing I want is just a smoke show.
The best way to avoid anything even remotely like that is to stay as much like stock when it comes to fuel as possible. And the only way to do that and still have the ability to make any more power is going to be with a stock-like injector with a longer stroke, and that would be the AC code injectors.
Okay, and so that's what would come in your power package that you guys have on your website is an AC 160.
Yeah, that's what it would be. Like I said, more important than a package is just the components themselves, and that's what I'm going to send over in a list later. So.
Yeah, and that's what I was just reading on that. Had a little bit of free time while I was waiting, and so I was scrolling through your whole page, pretty much your whole website, and that was just one of the things I was curious about, and that's actually a lot of the questions you've answered for me is because I wasn't sure the difference of what you would actually gain versus the two sets of injectors.
Yeah, it's I think that's really what it comes down to. Is it's not I guess it's not that complicated, but everyone, including me, years ago, for a long time, just thought about injector sizes wrong, like what their function is, I think it kind of helps to just think about it mechanically a little bit different, and then it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, and that you've answered a lot of my questions, and so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'll send this list over to you once you have a chance to look at it, or anytime as you're going through the build. If you have any questions, feel free to reply to that, or just reach out by phone. We're happy to answer anything that comes up, or hopefully we can help you with whatever comes up. Hey, if you guys like this show, share it with your friends. Share it with anybody you think would enjoy it. I really appreciate you guys listening. Check out the next episodes of the 1023 Soul Shop Talk podcast, and you can find us at 1023soul.com if you're looking for parts. Thanks for listening.